Israel has banned the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, from operating in Israel and parts of Jerusalem and is severely restricting its activities in the occupied territories. If fully implemented, this would effectively cut off the group's ability to operate in Gaza. The UNRWA chief says the Israeli actions will have disastrous consequences. I'm now joined by Juliette, Touma, UNRWA Director of Communications, who is in Amman, Jordan. Juliette, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to start off with the news that this ban forbids contact between Israeli officials and UNRWA. We know from Britain and France and Germany, they've reiterated their concern over this. What impact is this going to have on your operations? How will you be able to conduct your work if you're not able to communicate with officials there?
So we still don't know what this actually means because to date we've not received any communication from the government of Israel on how they will implement this ban.
So you don't know yet, right, at this point in time. What are you expecting in terms of how this will be implemented overall? How are you preparing for that eventuality?
Look, at this stage, our focus is to stay and deliver across the occupied West Bank, including Jerusalem, as one example. Our health teams are in the clinics. They're providing primary health care, supplies and consultations in the Gaza Strip. Our teams are across the Gaza Strip distributing aid, bringing that very vital aid into Gaza.
But back to the question about whether your communications with Israel and the Israeli government have been cut off. Are you currently in communication, still in communication with the Israeli government?
There's been no change on the ground. Operationally, yes. We continue to bring in supplies to Gaza, and we have not received communications from the government on how they plan to implement this bill.
All right. Well, you're still talking clearly as we wait more news on that. But I want to go into what we heard last year, that Israel accusing UNRWA of having Hamas members, resulting in countries around the world halting funding. After the investigation, there were 9 members that were linked to Hamas. Israel's foreign ministry is now accusing UNRWA of being, quote, infested with Hamas terror activity. What is your response to that?
So look, we've received those claims almost exactly 1 year ago, and there was an investigation that the UN highest investigative body in New York did and concluded. And the outcomes of that investigation is that in the case of 9 staff members of UNRWA, there might have been the possibility that they have participated in the horrors of 7 of October. If the evidence would be authenticated or corroborated, which it was not. Despite that, UNRWA fired these staff members.
The Israeli Foreign Minister's spokesperson also wrote, quote, there are multiple alternative organizations to UNRWA that are already operating to facilitate humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip, and their role will only increase. It is a shame that some international political players seem to care more about UNRWA than the issue of humanitarian aid itself. What is UNRWA's stance on this? What do you say to this? Do you believe that UNRWA can be replaced by other aid organizations?
UNRWA cannot be replaced by another organization. For example, no other United Nations agency provides schooling in United Nations schools. Only UNRWA does that. The same applies to primary healthcare. Also in Gaza, we have the largest footprint. We have more than 5,000 people working for the agency. We have a huge reach across the Gaza Strip. And we also have the trust of the communities in Gaza. The second largest UN agency, just as an example, has over 200 people working for them in Gaza.
Hoda Hussein, a woman who was displaced with her family from near Khan Yunis, told CNN, she said this: "We rely on God and then UNRWA." What are you hearing from Gazans who rely so heavily on UNRWA and your aid? There's so many questions here. Firstly, there's a big question around whether this is part of Israel's efforts to remove UNRWA from Gaza. And I'm wondering, while you're still in communication now, things are going on as normal. If you stop that communication, could you give me insight of what that would look like for Palestinians in Gaza right now?
So if UNRWA is banned from working in Gaza, from bringing in much needed supplies into Gaza, this will have a serious impact on the ceasefire, which is already very fragile, as you know. So the risks to the implementation of the ceasefire are very high. And so this is exactly why we need to bring in supplies, and we need to maintain the coordination with the Israeli authorities to coordinate bringing in supplies. That also includes fuel, by the way, for people who need us most. At the moment, we've reached, only since the ceasefire started, more than 600,000 people with aid and food.
Can you confirm that that all of your international staff have already left Gaza after their visas expired, but local Palestinian employees of UNRWA are still working?
No, our international staff who are normally based in occupied East Jerusalem, they indeed have left on the 29th of January, just a couple of days ago, when their visas expired. UNRWA continues to have international personnel in the Gaza Strip, however.
All right, Juliette, Touma, thank you so much for your insight today. Thanks for joining us.